Hello, my name is Lisa Brandt, and today I'm representing the Human Trafficking Task Force of Southern Colorado. We are a 12-year nonprofit organization operating in our community, with our mission being to prevent labor and sex trafficking through awareness and advocacy, to intervene in the human trafficking cycle through collaboration with individuals, agencies, and organizations, and then to connect those impacted by modern-day slavery to restorative resources. My own journey began about 12 years ago with the adoption of our daughter from Miret from Africa. She's from Ethiopia, and we realized in that process the vulnerability of orphans globally because they do not have advocates. So since that time, I've been engaged in this battle against human trafficking. Our nation is committed to this issue as well. In 2000, we passed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, and in it we set up a number of processes to combat and monitor this crime globally as well as domestically. Now, one of those things is the Trafficking in Persons report, which is produced annually by the State Department. And in fact, just this week, the 2020 report was released. And this is a diplomatic tool that we use with other nations around the world to help them think about human trafficking in their own countries and how they can combat and stop it. So the definition of human trafficking, which is in the TVPA, is somewhat long, but there's basically a nutshell version that you need to understand. There are three words: force, fraud, and coercion for the profit of another person. So anytime someone is exploiting an individual and making money off of that exploitation, that can be considered human trafficking. So how large is this industry? Next slide, please. The profits made from human trafficking globally, according to the Labor Organization's 2014 estimate, is approximately $150 billion. Now, it's very difficult to get accurate data for this industry because it's hidden in plain sight. But that is what the International Labor Organization says. Okay, next slide, please. So we know that human trafficking exists in other parts of the world, and that's usually to the average American. What we think of is that it's in Indonesia or if it's over in Africa, but in fact it is here in America. FBI Special Agent Taylor Dervish said, "Sex trafficking is a problem that occurs every day of the year in every city and in every town in the country." And this map that you see up here is produced by the Urban Institute, a research arm of the Department of Justice. And in 2015, they did a 350-page research assessment of human trafficking in 8 major U.S. cities. What they found is that the average Denver pimp makes $31,200 per week. So you can see that this is a very lucrative industry, and it's what drives these traffickers to continue. Next slide. Polaris is an organization based in Washington, D.C., and they run our national human trafficking hotline, and you'll get that number at the end of this presentation. And they are doing a great job helping us to understand that most of us don't know where to look. This is hidden in plain sight. And this very workshop is intended to help you have eyes to see human trafficking in your community. Next slide. So this map is also from Polaris. They are the foremost authority in our nation on the crime of human trafficking, both sex and labor trafficking. And they say Denver is the 7th largest city for sex trafficking in the United States, along with the Urban Institute in that report I mentioned before. Okay, so we're going to watch just a portion of this video, and the reason it's very important is that it was produced in the fall of 2018 for Hope Academy, which is a nonprofit that serves victims of human trafficking. The reason I like to show this video is twofold. Number one, please pay close attention to the comments of Detective Chris Stadler with FBI's Innocence Lost. And then also pay attention to the way traffickers use violence and threats and coercion to control their victims. There's a story about a key on a chain that the trafficker kept around his neck to control his victim, so pay attention to that story. Go ahead.
I was trafficked with 13 other girls, and I am the only one who's still alive today.
My youngest daughter said, I want to tell you about my missions project, and I said, okay, what is it? She said, human trafficking. I said, oh, like Cambodia and Thailand. She said, no, Mom, like Denver. And I was just blown away. What do you mean this happens here?
We're recovering girls and boys at a rate of over 100 a year. That's just what we know about and the tips that we get, and we really try to stay proactive. I would venture to say we're getting several thousand. I mean, it's really hard to put a number on that just because it's a crime that likes to hide in plain sight. People believe that kids are going to get kidnapped off the street or kidnapped from their homes. That's really not what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot more of these kids be approached in local shopping malls, at school, at parks, through social media.
We need hope.
It's not that these kids are all runaways. They're not all drug addicts. They didn't all just decide to go sell themselves. They were groomed. They were attracted by someone who they felt loved them, someone that they felt really cared about them. They just didn't know that this was going to happen or that it could happen. I have a girl who met a guy at Starbucks. He told her he was a college student back in town for the summer. He was working at a Fortune 500 company as an intern. It was his story. She dated him all summer, thought he was a great guy, went to her sister's soccer games with her, spent time with the family, decided at the end of the summer he didn't want to go back to college, that he was going to transfer and go to school here in Denver. One night they went to his supposed cousin's house. She was just hanging out with these guys, thinking they seemed nice enough. They went into the cousin's bedroom and kind of were making out. They were being teenagers, is how she felt. And he said, it's time for us to make a real commitment here. If you're really my girlfriend, it's time. And she said, oh no, I don't want to. Let's wait until we're married. And he said, no, it's time. This is what's going to happen. And she ultimately consented, but consent is a loaded word when you're in a situation with someone you think you're in love with. When they got done, his friends, his cousins, were all in the room with them. And the next thing she knew, she was being raped by all of the cousins, and everything was being videotaped. They proceeded to tell her that if she said anything about it, they would show the videotape of her with her boyfriend to her parents, and that they would also hurt her siblings. Then she was told that this is what she was going to do now. She was going to start making money. It was going to be after school. She started lying to her parents, and she would be picked up by one of the guys. He would take her to wherever, apartment, hotel. She would be sold until it was time to go home for dinner. She would go to school, and she would be picked up again after school. She never missed a day of school. She still got good grades, but she was being trafficked the whole time.
The average age of entry is 12 to 14 years old into sex trafficking. Some of these kids that are running away and they're getting caught up with the street life and drug use, and then these other kids that are living in multi-million-dollar houses or very affluent parts of town that are becoming victims of the exact same thing.
Your body is a menu. They get to pick off the menu what they want. They know the prices up front, and you're just a piece of property to them. You walk into the room and it's like, okay, I'd almost prefer if you would just let me get this over with, but then you have to go in there smiling, like you're so excited to be there.
These girls are looking at these guys and they're going, ew, he's 50, he's gross, he looks like my dad or my friend's dad, and there's nothing about him that's attractive because I'm 15. He wants me to tell him that I think he is the most handsome, sexy man I've ever seen in my life. And what I really feel is that I want to vomit. And if I could vomit on him, it would be even better, because he should be away from me. But the reality is, I don't have a choice. I'm going to be beaten if I don't do my job.
My in particular pimp would wear my house key around his neck on a chain. And he would tell me, if you run, I know where your mom and your little brother are, and I will kill them. I have this key. I could get in without a sound.
That's only about half the video, and you should have access to a whole list of resources that I'm going to give you that includes this video. But you can see that the trafficker will stop at nothing to have the profit from his victim. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is from the previous one, is from the Rocky Mountain PBS documentary that aired in the fall of 2017 called Traded and Trafficked. And this is just further proof that this activity exists along the Front Range. You can see that during this period of 2012 to 2017, 43 cases were charged in El Paso County. If you went just a little bit further up the road to Arapahoe County, you would see that 101 cases were charged during that time. And what you need to understand is that trafficking is a very slippery crime. It's very hard to catch these people. So when you see those numbers, it's really just the tip of the iceberg, but it does validate that it is occurring here. And in fact, just in early July, there was a sentencing here in El Paso County for a trafficker, and this trafficker received 8 years to life in prison. Next slide, please. Okay, so who are these traffickers? All these are from Colorado, and the reality is that traffickers or pimps can be any gender, age, race, nationality. There's no certain profile. In one document that I have from the Department of Education called Human Trafficking in America's Schools, there's a story of one cheerleader who was trafficking other students in her school. So you just can't figure it out by looking at a person who the trafficker is. So I'm going to tell you about these people. On the left of your screen, we have Raymond Fredericks, 32, from Aurora, sentenced to 22 years for trafficking 2 girls. Next, we have Brock Franklin, age 31, from Centennial, convicted on 30 felony counts. He has the absolute longest sentence in history in the United States of America, 472 years. Then next, we have William Vermillion from Colorado Springs. This was in 2019, solicited a child for sex, etc. And then the last person up here, Kyaisha Queen Tisdale, 35, from Colorado Springs, as well as other areas. So these are what traffickers look like. And what I have been learning, and this is just a black hole of information, there is so much to learn about this in particular crime, but traffickers tend to have no consciences, okay? And I've been reading this book called The Sociopath Next Door by Harvard-educated Dr. Martha Stout. And the way that these traffickers can perpetuate this crime is because they don't have a conscience about it. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is from FBI's Innocence Lost in Denver. What role does the internet play? Well, you'll see that there are all sorts of apps up here, and it doesn't really matter what the specific app is, because within the next few weeks there will probably be another one. I still have 4 children at home, 2 of whom are teenagers, and I'm always very surprised by the pace with which the landscape is changing in regard to our cell phones. But just notice here on the bottom bullet, 82% of online sex crimes against minors, the offender used the victim's social networking site to gain information about the victim's likes and dislikes. We're going to look at a couple of videos here, and you'll see how through gaming and through social media, traffickers can access our children. So let's show those 2, please.
So, test papers from last week. Some of them good, some of them not so good. I think we all need to improve before the real thing. In a couple of weeks, thank you. That was excellent. That was all right. Have a look at comments on there. That needs work, as does that. That was okay. Nelson, I don't know what's going on here. Can you see me after the lesson, please? That was excellent. Good. Comments on that, I think that needs work. That was excellent. Okay, so, characterisation and criticism for next week, please. Everyone. Nelson. Nelson.
You have one job. Yeah, goalkeeper. Get stuck in the net. Joker.
Okay, and the next video is a Fox News report.
The first time in years, Bianca Mendoza says things are looking up. She escaped from a man in early February who she says pimped her out for years. Police arrested him days later. His name is Ariel Guizar, but he's known on social media as Shy Boy.
Do you call him Shy Boy or do you
I call him Shy.
You call him Shy?
Yeah, that's what everybody really calls him. They know him by Shy.
The teen tells us she met Guizar on Instagram when she was just 15 years old.
I came across his tattooing page on Instagram and saw he had a lot of followers and I liked his tattoos, so I would like his pictures, and then he started liking mine and he would comment on my pictures and we exchanged numbers.
Unhappy at home and after years of being in and out of the court system, she ran away, agreeing to meet up with the then 33-year-old man, thinking they would have a relationship. I asked her when it all changed.
He would have sex with other girls in front of me and stuff like that. So I was just okay, it's not like how I thought, but I don't know. And then that's when he had his friends go to the hotel room and have them basically do whatever they wanted with me. And when I told him about it, he didn't care.
It was that same day in a motel in San Jose when she says she first started prostituting for him.
The first time I worked for him, I only had probably about 5 to 8 guys a day.
Would you like the assistance of an attorney, Mr. Weezar?
Weezar, seen here in court, is charged with pimping a minor, pandering, forcible rape, along with felony drug and weapons charges. In response to questions about his charges, public defender Milani Bartholomew gave us a no comment. Police say Weezar advertised Bianca and other girls on Backpage.com and his social media accounts.
I'll be posting videos soon.
We found posts on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. Bianca tells us he posted a video of her with a client. She tried to leave, and he forced her to stay.
So I told me that if I had anybody try to pick me up, that he would kill them before they took off with me. When I started working for him again, it was up to more than 20 guys a day, because he would tell us, you guys have to make $1,000 and then you guys could go to sleep.
So $1,000 a day and then she could go to sleep. And that is how a pimp can accumulate $31,000 a week. Now, a few things from this video I'd like to point out. How did Bianca connect with trafficking? Simply by liking Instagram photos. And so what is a trafficker's greatest tool to exploit? It's the cell phone. When we give our children cell phones without any kind of monitoring, and certainly without any conversations, it's like handing them a loaded weapon. So we as parents need to be careful how we utilize these tools. Next slide, please. So what is the victim-trafficker relationship? Well, as you can see in this graph here at the top, it says strangers are only 9%. Mostly our teens are approached by family friends, employers, friends, people they know. There's a very methodical grooming process that lures these victims into this life. Brittany met a man at her local mall who offered her a job at his restaurant, and instead of working as a waitress, Brittany was forced to sell sex in a motel room. This is from a Polaris survivor story. Next slide. So how do the traffickers control? Well, they control through physical and sexual abuse, just like Bianca discussed, isolation, mental and psychological abuse, drug or alcohol dependency, document withholding and threats of deportation, that's largely in labor trafficking, debt bondage, threats against the victim's family and friends. And this quote is from the first of 10 rules from the leader of a prostitution ring. And yes, there are books and websites where you can learn how to traffic people. He says, always make them need and depend on you so that you have power over them. Power is control. So that's what the trafficker is all about, control and power. Next slide. So demand. What do the sex buyers look like? Well, let's be clear. Sex trafficking would not exist without demand. As a society, we must look at the stories that we tell that shape our conception of gender and sexuality. What is the message of pop culture about what it means to be a man, woman, or sexual being? The internalization of these stories as we grow up form and shape our values. At the root of the commercial sex industry is male demand, cultivated in the ground of our pornographic culture. So the problem we're facing today is one of facilitating our culture. So do these men look like someone you would think would buy sex? Well, let's look at who they are. Right up here on the left, we have 62-year-old Kyle Akers. He was arrested in conjunction with Operation Broken Heart. A Colorado Springs doctor arrested by the police. And then to the right, we have an Army recruiter, Hardcastle, bragged that he's had sex with girls as young as 12. Investigators say he preyed on girls on social media sites like Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and others. For a while, the Colorado Springs Police Department did release the photos of buyers and publish them in the Gazette. They no longer do that. But I will say that the head of CSPD's Human Trafficking Unit in a District 20 presentation several years ago, which is in the northern part of the city, said, I could find human trafficking within a 1-mile radius of this building. That's how prevalent it is. Next slide. Okay, so what fuels demand? Absolutely, without a doubt, pornography fuels demand. In one click, with no money, anyone can get on the website called Pornhub, which was launched in 2007 in Montreal, Canada. And according to Psychology Today, out of the world's tens of millions of internet sites, Pornhub ranks number 4. 72% of porn is watched on our smartphones. Now, this graph up here represents various countries and their consumption of pornography. The United States is the bottom graph. We are the largest consumer of pornography in the world. Now, I mentioned that I have teenage daughters. I listen to a lot of contemporary songs, and I believe that a lot of the movies and songs that we're taking in feed this issue of pornography. Let me just tell you a couple of these statistics that are on your screen. Every minute, Pornhub has about 64,000 new visitors with over 200,000 watched videos. 58,000 searches are performed. So in my research for this, I found that the Pornhub daily visits now exceed 100 million. And to put that in perspective, that's as if the combined populations of Canada, Poland, and Australia all visited Pornhub every day. There is a movement afoot to, there's some legal action being taken. There's also a petition that you could sign, but we definitely need to, as a nation, fight against this evil. If you or someone you know is engaging in pornography, you are actually complicit in human trafficking, because many of the people who have come out of the life say that they were required to do sexual acts and it be recorded to be put on websites. All right, next slide. This quote at the top is from a docuseries called Brain, Heart, World. It's excellent. I would really encourage you to watch it if you want to learn more. But Preston says, it was affecting my relationship. I was physically attracted to her, but I was so conditioned to watching pornography and looking at a computer screen that being with a real person just wasn't enough anymore. So porn kills love because the acts are watched and it embeds ideas, and then the users want to act those things out, and it never satisfies. So you have to get more and more and more to get the same high you got previously. Next slide, please. To learn more about this, please go to the websites Fight the New Drug, Your Brain on Porn, or EndSexualExploitation.org. At that last website, you can download a PDF of this document called The Public Health Harms of Pornography. This is strictly research. It's not anybody's opinion about it. It's what pornography does to the brain and to the relationships. All right, next, let's talk about the signs of human trafficking. Now, you'll see these tattoos here. Traffickers are known to brand their victims just like cattle are branded. So that's what these pictures are about. But I'm just going to read off some of the signs. Evidence of being controlled, not able to speak on their own behalf, avoiding eye contact, vacant stares, visible scars or bruises, no documentation, obsessive about phone control. And we're going to watch a video here in just a minute, and I'd like for you to watch for some of these things, especially that one. New clothing or possessions, depression, preoccupied about getting money, lies about age and identity, unexplained absences, sudden changes, isolation from family and friends, affiliated with a gang, no control over their schedule, references frequent travel, has hotel key cards, much older significant other, signs of abuse, chronically runs away, substance abuse issues, overly promiscuous, or exhibits submissive, fearful, or anxious behavior. Those are a lot of signs, I understand, and it will take you a while to kind of get your head around this. But bottom line is trust your instinct. Sergeant Simpson once told of a story of some patrons who were at Panera. They saw something that didn't look right. They called CSPD with their tip, and that was the one piece of the puzzle that led to apprehending a trafficker. Next slide, please. Okay, before we show this video, I just want to set it up for you. This is put together by the Department of Justice and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The series is called Can You See Me? This is an excellent tool to use on social media as you try to educate your peers about this issue. I'd like for you to look for some of the signs that I just mentioned, and it will help you when you're in your daily life. Let's go ahead and play that.
Can anyone tell me what the different chromosome is for a male versus a female? Yes.
XX is female and XY is male.
Correct?
Mrs. Doddle's up here.
No, it's down.
It's right here. That's important. We're trying to study.
What is this?
Nothing.
What is this? What are you doing?
It's nothing.
Who is that?
Nobody.
Who is that? Who are you texting?
Nobody.
So you didn't tell your parents that you were coming over here tonight, right? Chill with us.
Get off me! What the hell is your problem?
Who the hell do you think you are? Huh?
Hey. It's gonna be fun. Come over here.
I think it's important to say that many times victims or survivors don't acknowledge that they are being trafficked. There is such profound psychological damage going on that even months after they may be removed from a situation, they're still referring to their trafficker or pimp as their boyfriend or their daddy. So this is a very complex situation. You should never try to address a situation like this yourself, but you should rather report it. So next slide, please. This is an infographic from the Department of Justice. It says commercial sexual exploitation and sex trafficking of minors in the U.S. are commonly overlooked, misunderstood, and unaddressed forms of child abuse. It requires education of a number of spheres in our community to really make a dent in this crime. So let's look at the next slide. Schools need to be educated. I have spent a lot of time in our city talking to superintendents, leaders, teachers in various districts, and many are unaware that this is happening in our schools. So a lot of education needs to occur in our schools. I spoke to a group of about 500 at Mitchell High School, and I found the students to be highly receptive, highly engaged. It's usually the adults that struggle more with confronting the realities of this issue than the students do, because it's their world. This is the reality. Okay, so the other category that needs to be addressed is law enforcement. And there are still many people in law enforcement that could not spot the signs of human trafficking, and their own leaders will tell you that. So we have a long ways to go in law enforcement. Next slide. Judges, courts, and lawyers. There are judges that don't understand the dynamics of human trafficking. They think it's old-fashioned prostitution. They do not understand the exploitation that's occurring. So our desire is to educate them and go to sentencings in our city when they occur to let the judges know that we care about this issue. The next, businesses, hotels, financial institutions, and transportation industry. So next slide, please. Airline Ambassadors International and Truckers Against Trafficking are making a big difference in the transportation industry, and we need more organizations like this. Next slide. And then finally, healthcare. With the Human Trafficking Task Force, I'm in charge of a presentation team, and I'm just a volunteer, but we have several doctors and nurses that are specifically on a team to address healthcare in our city. If you have leads for administrators at hospitals or clinics or even private practices that would be interested in hearing this information, we will send a representative who is a healthcare professional into that space so that they can get educated. So collaboration is what's necessary, and that's what the Human Trafficking Task Force is all about, is pulling people from various industries, private business, government officials, and us all working together on this issue. All right, next slide. So what can you do? Well, become more educated on this issue. As I said earlier, you'll have access to a list of resources so that you don't have to just Google this issue. There's just so much information out there. If you just started with the resource list I give you, that would be sufficient for now. Attend local trainings, symposiums, and other events on this topic. Use your influence to bring awareness to this, maybe even social media. Seek opportunities to volunteer, mentor, or educate. There are many opportunities in the city. Donate your professional service. Right now we're in need of a graphic artist. Schedule a speaker to come and talk to your workplace, club, neighborhood, any kind of group you can think of. We will come do a free presentation. Advocate for state and federal legislation. There's a nonprofit organization called Shared Hope that years ago rated states on their effectiveness in combating human trafficking, and they have done a lot to advance our legislation, so you can get involved in that fight. And then finally, give your time and money to anti-trafficking organizations. Next slide. But perhaps the most important thing you can do is if you see something, say something. On the left here, we have the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which I already mentioned earlier. And then on the right, if you're in Colorado, when you see suspicious activity, you call this hotline, 866-455-5075. I recommend everyone put these in your phone, because if you are like my 18-year-old daughter was, traveling down Academy and sees something in another car, you're going to want to dial that number at the next red light. So put those numbers in your phone. Next slide. These are just some examples of what will be on the resource list for your review. And next slide. Finally, get involved locally in El Paso County. We meet the second Tuesday of every month. In fact, this week we had a virtual meeting on Zoom. We usually have 75 or so people from the community there, concerned citizens, all the way to professionals in law enforcement and public service. We have an annual trafficking all-day symposium in the fall and a legislative advocacy day in the spring. And so we hope that you'll look at our website and find ways to get more involved. Thank you for your time.